My name is Nikki Mahar, and I'm here with Robert C. Fisler School in Fullerton, and I'm so glad you shared that you admitted that you Googled, because I Googled a bit too. I was really honored to be asked to share some thoughts at today's luncheon, but as the date rapidly approached, and I hadn't yet begun my speech, I began to panic. I'm normally a decent writer, but nothing was coming to me. So I did what any self-respecting workshop teacher would do, and I thought of a teaching point. Writers brainstorm seed ideas by browsing the internet. I browsed Facebook. When I didn't find any inspiration there, I started thinking of keywords that I could type in that would help me really find some inspiration. I was looking for a theme for my speech. And if necessary, at that point, I wasn't opposed to being a speechwriter. I watched a TED Talk video by Bill Gates about teacher evaluations and the need to revamp them. I read that awesome poem or story called What I Teach. And then I started browsing various memes and anecdotes. I stumbled across one that initially didn't appear to have anything to do with education, so stick with me. It's called Lipstick in School. The author is unknown. It goes like this. According to a news report, a certain private school in Washington was recently faced with a unique problem. A number of 12-year-old girls were beginning to use lipstick, put it on in the bathroom. That was fine, but then after they put it on, they would press their lips to the mirror, leaving dozens of little lip prints. Every night, custodian would remove the lip prints, and the next day, the girls would put them back. Finally, the principal decided that something needed to be done. She called all the girls to the bathroom and met them there with the custodian. She explained that all these lip prints were causing a major problem for him. He had to clean those mirrors every single night. You can just imagine the yawns from these little princesses. To demonstrate how difficult it had been to clean the mirrors over again, she asked the custodian to show the girls how much effort was required. He took out a long-handled squeegee, dipped it into the toilet, and cleaned the mirror with it. The problem stopped. No more lip prints on the mirror. You see, there are teachers, and then there are educators. That custodian was clearly an educator. As I pondered what that really meant, it struck me. This was it. This was my theme. Yes, lipstick, mirrors, and toilet water. And mortified 12-year-olds. I got it. But then seriously, when I scrolled past this and gave it a little bit more thought, I actually realized there's really something here. Or maybe at this point I was just so desperate I was willing to make anything work. Well, let's start with the lipstick on the mirror. The lipstick to me was an analogy to the struggles that we're all faced with when we take on something new. And a little analogous to how kids sometimes just do weird stuff that leaves us scratching our heads. Sometimes the blemishes, like the lipstick on the mirror, leave a lasting mark on us as teachers. We ask ourselves, where did we go wrong? Why am I struggling so much to help this reader? What am I missing? We just want the strategies we teach to stick, but sometimes they don't, unlike the lipstick. For the first half of the year, my little Hannah fake-talked her way through every single reading conference with me. So tell me about a strategy you've been using in your reading, Hannah. She stutters and her breathing quickens. She looks nervously at the other students around. She looks at your conferring notebook, probably wondering what you've been writing about her. She glances at her reader's notebook, wishing that she'd done a better job of jotting some things down as she read, like you've been bugging her to do. Finally, she says, well, I've been using that one strategy, where you taught us to, oh boy, this is painful, you think to yourself. You decide to be generous and help her out. Oh, that strategy, yeah, the one where you have a strong thought about something and you jot down what happened and the strong thought you had to go with it. Great job, Hannah, keep up the good work. And then you move over to Dylan, who you've seen his eyes following you around the classroom. But every time you glance at him, his eyes are intensely focused on his book. And at first you're kind of excited that he is reading. Then your mentor bursts your bubble by sharing her notes with you at your debrief and lets you know that he was on page 42 when you started workshop, and when you ended 30 minutes later, he was on page 43. And he doesn't have one single jot in his reader's notebook. You wonder, why would he do such a thing? It's so boring to stare at me for half an hour when he could be getting into this book. Well, let's be honest, when we first started our journey, and some of us are still a bit guilty of this, we faked it a little too. We sat down at a conferring time with a student listening on their reading and had zero clue what to teach. So we faked it. We might have said something like, great job, keep up the great reading, or what I'd like to teach you today is that, and as you looked around the room, you realized your mentor was nowhere to be found. So you said, I'd like to teach you that readers, they keep reading. That went well. But the great thing about Cotsen is that if you have a mentor like mine, worth way more than her weight in gold, she laughs alongside you, pats you on the back, and says, it's all a part of the journey. You are where you are. And amazingly, as you reflect, you realize you have grown. And so have your students. When you sit down with Hannah at the end of the year, she no longer has to fake a conference with you. When you ask her what she's been working on as a reader, you have to hold back tears. When you hear her say, well, I've been noticing some character traits and how this main character has changed through my book. The main character was really a selfish girl at first because she kept, but then you've zoned out because you're thinking about how much Hannah has changed and grown as a reader in your class this year, and how amazing it has been to watch her grow and to have a record of it in that conferring notebook. And now Dylan has page after page of jots in his reader's notebook, and he whines when you tell the kids that workshop is over. You look at his daily reading record, and he has read 23 pages today. And you realize you never once saw the whites of his eyeballs because his nose was buried in his book. Okay, so let's move on. Now let's think about that mirror. It's not a stretch to see where I'm going with this one. The mirror is analogous to, well, a mirror. For most of us, Cotsen has provided us with that mirror, our mentor. He or she is a mirror for us that has allowed us to evaluate and reflect on our teaching practice. She is a very non-judgmental second pair of eyes in the room. With the opportunity to constantly reflect on our instructional practices with our mentor by our side, we felt brave enough, supported enough, strong enough to sometimes make monumental changes to the way we do things. And when we tried new things after feeling courageous and brave, sometimes they went well and sometimes they didn't. But like the custodian in our story, the next morning we arrived on campus and the mirror was wiped clean. We started each day fresh, not dwelling on what went wrong, but focusing on what went right and how to make that happen more often. Our mentor encouraged us, prodded us, sometimes she downright shoved us into uncomfortable situations and to push ourselves into making instructional breakthroughs. And finally we come to the toilet water, part you've all been waiting for. I'm sure you're thinking, boy, this is where her speech fails epically. How's she going to pull this part off? You'd be right if I didn't take a considerable amount of time to do what Cotsen taught me to do best at this point, reflect. I realize that the analogy there lies more with the lesson taught than the toilet water itself. We all realize that the custodian did not really use toilet water to clean the mirror each night, but he made the girls think he had. In that moment, he pulled a tool out of his toolkit and he used it to teach the girls something that they desperately needed to learn. I doubt he was actually trained to do that. Somehow, some way, he had this genius idea when faced with a difficult challenge, and without missing a beat, he implemented his plan and it was successful. That's what Cotsen has done for me. They've armed me with the best toolkits, fabulous trainings, weekly meetings with my mentor, reflection through various lenses with the constant and unwavering support of my fellows. This has made me at times feel like a genius with an amazing toolkit, armed to do the job of teaching reading, facing difficult challenges, and coming up with ideas on the spot. When I go back to my classroom on Monday, I'll teach my mini lesson, say off you go, panic maybe a little when I sit down and confer with Matthew because he's a brilliant reader and I sometimes feel inept to teach him anything, but then I'll read with them. I'll talk to him. I'll get to know him through the conversation even more than I do already, and miraculously, hopefully, an idea for a teaching point will pop into my mind. And I'll be able to teach him something new. Some people would say that's God, but I think it's God and Cotsen. Cotsen, thank you for having faith in us, for plucking us from our classrooms and sending us to world-class training with the best reading, writing, and CGI teachers. Thank you for recognizing that we are great educators and for knowing that you could propel us into excellence. Thank you for money to spend on our classroom libraries, professional development books, more trainings, book tubs and labels that were falling apart, writers workshop holders, and more. Most of all, thank you for standing by our side, walking with us hand in hand, and for sending us an angel on earth, our mentors. For without you and her, now really, these changes would not have been possible. Thank you.